Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really specific and honestly super fascinating sociological and philosophical framework all about family dynamics. We're going to be looking at the core conceptual difference between equality and equity, and how our source material applies those exact concepts right into the structure of the family. Specifically, we're looking at the roles and rights of mothers and fathers. It's an incredibly thought-provoking analysis, and it kind of forces us to look way beyond just simple math when we think about what fairness actually means.
Section 1, the mother's first right.
So to really get this framework, our source actually kicks things off with a well-known narrative from Islamic tradition. In it, a companion walks right up to the Prophet to ask a super fundamental question. He asks, "Who is the most deserving of my good companionship?" Now take a second and think about how you might answer that in your own life. Out of literally everyone in society, your friends, your community, your broader family, who holds that absolute number one priority for your kindness, your care, and your good treatment? Well, the source details this really profound repetition in the response. According to the text, the prophet answers the companion's question by simply saying, "Your mother." Okay, so the companion follows up and asks, "Who next?" The answer? Again, "Your mother." The companion tries a third time, "Who next?" And for the third time, the answer is, "Your mother." It's actually only on the fourth time of asking, "Who next?" that the answer finally shifts to, "Your father." So based on that foundational story, we're suddenly presented with this very strict numerical ratio. We've got 3 degrees of rights assigned to the mother and just 1 degree of right assigned to the father. This super clear 3-to-1 ratio in favor of the mother when it comes to who deserves your best companionship sets up the central mystery we're looking at today. Why exactly does this apparent imbalance exist within this structure?
Section 2, paradise beneath mother's feet.
Now, before we actually solve that mathematical mystery, the source layers on another massive principle. It quotes, "Paradise lies beneath the feet of mothers." And the text is super deliberate in pointing out a very specific detail here. This ultimate honor, literally the metaphorical location of paradise itself, was specifically and exclusively attributed to mothers. As the source notes, this was absolutely not said about fathers. The mother is placed on a totally separate pedestal here. Which, of course, brings us right back to our central puzzle, right? We've seen that 3-to-1 ratio. We've seen the exclusive attribution of this ultimate honor. But why? Why does the mother get 3 times the rights of the father when it comes to a child's duty of good companionship? I mean, if we look at this through a modern lens of strict 1-to-1 equality, it seems heavily skewed. But to really understand the why, we have to dig into the underlying philosophy that's actually driving this entire structure. Section 3. Insaf versus kissed. Okay, so the absolute key to solving our puzzle lies in distinguishing between 2 very specific Arabic terms used in the source material. First up, we have insaf. As the source defines it, insaf translates roughly to strict equality. And they use this incredibly relatable analogy to explain it. Imagine you've got one roti, a piece of flatbread. Insaf is cutting that bread perfectly down the middle. You give exactly half to one person and exactly half to the other. It is mathematically strictly equal. Now, the source absolutely acknowledges that insaf is a good thing, but it asserts that this strict mathematical equality is not actually the primary mechanism Islam uses for building societal structure. Now we need to contrast that with our second term, kist. The source tells us that Islam focuses deeply on kist, which translates much closer to equity or fairness based on circumstance. The analogy given here is all about carrying a load. Let's say a really heavy burden needs to be lifted. Well, kist dictates that you actually look at the individuals involved first. The person who is physically stronger, they're given a heavier portion of the burden to carry. The person who is weaker gets a lighter burden. You definitely don't split the weight 50-50. Instead, you distribute it according to capacity. And that right there perfectly illustrates the core philosophical divergence we're talking about. On one side, you have insaf, the completely equal split of the bread. On the other side, you have kist, the distribution of heavy burdens based entirely on capacity. The source material argues that, hey, while insaf totally has its place, the Islamic framework operates on the much more nuanced equity of kist. It's not about making everything perfectly identical for everyone. It's about creating a fair, functional balance based on varying roles, strengths, and vulnerabilities.
Section 4, the balance of rights.
So now we can finally take this concept of kist and apply it right back to our central mystery. The source describes this as the equation balance. According to their sociological argument, applying kist here means that women, within this specific framework, were given fewer of the broader, heavy societal responsibilities to carry. And consequently, they were also given fewer outward authorities and powers. But, and this is the crucial part, to balance this equation, to ensure true equity rather than just stripping away power, the mother is granted a massively elevated status inside the family. She gets 3 times the rights over her children compared to the father. Looking completely objectively at the text here, we can literally see this equation at work. The mother's role is defined by lower outward societal responsibilities, which is then counterbalanced by possessing 3 degrees of familial rights. Then you look at the father's role. His is defined by holding higher societal responsibilities and burdens, which is counterbalanced by holding only 1 degree of familial rights over the child. So the framework basically uses the elevation of familial rights to offset the reduction in societal authority. It's attempting to achieve KIST, that true equity, across the entire human experience, rather than just forcing equality into one single column. Which ultimately leaves us with this final, really profound question to consider today. We've seen exactly how the source material uses the concept of KIST to explain a very specific family dynamic. But think about the broader implications of this for a second. How does understanding the fundamental difference between splitting things equally, like the bread, and distributing them fairly, like the burden, change how we view our own societal structures today? Does strict equality always equal fairness? It's honestly a fascinating lens through which to view the world. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll see you next time.